All right, so the next section here is writing expressions. So that's where you should be in your packet. Get these things out. Make sure you have your packet open to that part and be ready to go here. Pause if you need to, but let's jump in to see where this fits. All right, so in this section right here, we really are kind of meeting this standard right here. Writing expressions that record operations with numbers and with letters standing for numbers. We know that really means variables. We're writing expressions with numbers and variables. So that's where we're going in this particular section. If you kind of look where we are, we don't have a whole lot left after this. Okay, we're writing expressions. There's another lesson or two, but then it's really time to start reviewing for our test. All right, in student handout 5, writing expressions. Review the different ways the math operations can be stated. List as many synonyms as you can think of in the columns below. Here's what I want you to do. Write down a few words that you hear that you know that means addition. That means subtraction. That means multiplication. That means division. And this word means equals. Go ahead and think of the words that you know that kind of imply each of these operations. Pause it, write down what you think you can come up with, and then see how your list compares with words that we know mean these things. All right, so there's a whole bunch of these words that we know that when we use them in a math setting, they mean a certain operation. Like if we say more than, or increased by, or sum, or gain, or something's greater than, we know that these words are indicators that we want to use addition. We also know that these are indicators we want to use subtraction. Okay, if we talk about fewer, the difference, lost, decreased, less than. Same thing for multiplication. Certain words let us know we're talking about multiplication. And division, you got the quotient, which is your answer, you're divided by, split something, half something, shared equally, those are division clues. And when we see is and the same, we can talk about an equal sign. So these words kind of let us know what we are doing mathematically, and we want to pay special attention to them because they're going to pop up quite a bit in this lesson. So expressions, let's jump right to it. Number 1, verbal statements can be translated to algebraic expressions. They can be translated to algebraic expressions. It's like deciphering a secret message or translating from one language to another. You're going to see examples of this as we go. An expression is a mathematical phrase that contains numbers, variables, and operations. Pause it if you need to and write those down. It does not contain an equal sign. Expressions don't contain equal signs. Okay, we'll get to that later, but just know right now we're writing expressions. Okay, now there are parts of an expression. You can see here in this bottom part right here, this whole thing, 4 times d minus 9. Well, that's an expression, okay? So go ahead and kind of label that as a whole expression. Now, expressions are made up of terms, okay? Each of those items in there is a term. This is a term, all right? This is a term, but it's also something else, which is what I'll get to in a moment. Expressions are made up of terms. Now, we know this is the variable, okay? So the d represents some number. We know this is an operation. Subtraction is an operation. This is called a constant because it's not changing. We are subtracting a number that is not changing. This over here actually is changing though, because 4 can be multiplied by lots of different things, by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4. So you have variables that impact things and you have constants that don't really change. We're just subtracting 9. And then that over here, this would be the coefficient. It's the number that you would put in front of a variable if you wanted to multiply them. So that's terms to know. These are different parts of an expression that we want to be familiar with. If you need to pause that and catch up on those, please do. So write an algebraic expression to represent the verbal expression. If we look at this first one, 8 more than a number. Well, they don't tell us what number. They just tell us 8 more than something. So think of this as x. Okay, that's the unknown, a number. And we want 8 more than that. So that would be the unknown number plus 8. That's what's represented by those words. We just translated this statement into an expression. 8 more than something? Well, that'd be something plus 8. If I look at the next one, the difference between a number and 5. The difference between a number and 5. Let me get back to typing. So difference I know is subtraction, and I want to subtract a number and 5, but don't tell me what number. So I'm just going to use S just because that's where my key landed. S minus 5. That's the difference between a number and 5. Now, could I have used any letter here? I could have. I just picked S randomly. I picked X randomly. So we just know it's something minus 5. Over here, 19 added to a number. Okay, well, 19 added to a number. I'll use X again. Okay, now we really can't solve these because we don't know what number is, being added with 8. We don't know what number is being subtracted with 5, and the same here. But we can write the expression at least, and that gives us information that we can work with. Okay. Now, I want you to go ahead and try these 4 on your own and see how you do. Actually, not these 4, these 8. And then see how you do when you start it back up. Pause. All right, check your work, see how you did. They usually told you the variable, and then you had to apply an operation to it. Now, these are all addition or subtraction. So you could have been using any of those, but just kind of know what they were asking right here. A few things to point out. If it's addition, the order is kind of flexible. Like you could have done 19 plus J. You could have done 11 plus G. If it's subtraction, it's not so flexible. Okay, you have to make sure that this one was n minus 6 because we want 6 less than n. So we got to start here and we want 6 less than that, so we take away 6. This one had to be 10 minus q. Okay, now I understand that might have looked like 9 to some of you, but that was the variable, 10 and q. So the difference of 10 and q, well, that would just be 10 minus q. Okay, 14 increased by b. Ooh, I made a typo. Good thing I caught it. 14 increased by b. This was k less 7. That's kind of like k take away 7. This was 12 less than p. So when you see the less than, that means you kind of flip these two. We want to start here, and we want 12 less than that. So start at the variable, and we want to subtract 12. And then same thing here, t decreased by 3. That was pretty much straight left to right. T minus 3. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Multiplication is written side by side with your coefficient in front of the variable. Okay. So if you're going to combine things, you put the number first. The product of 9 and n, I would do 9n. Okay, that's what that one would look like. Q times 12, well, the number goes first, okay, 12q. You put the coefficient out front. There's that word again. Twice a number n. I do this. I do not do n2 because that's kind of backwards. The number goes first. Plus n2 could get confusing with exponents. We don't want to do that. 16 multiplied by j. Again, number first, variable right after it. So keep that in mind. The next part here is talking about division. Okay, with division, you must determine which is the divisor and which is the dividend. Now, if you remember, I'd put some visuals up here just to remind us. Sometimes we set it up this way, sometimes we set it up this way, and sometimes we set it up this way. But the dividend is usually the bigger number from what we're experiencing thus far, divided by, that's the divisor. We want to divide by something, and our quotient is our answer. So you got to kind of figure that out first because it applies to these problems now. Okay, k divided by 10. Well, that would just be k divided by 10. If this next one here says the quotient of x is 6, well, x divided by 6. Okay, 6. There we go. 9 divided by c. Well, 9 divided by, I'll just go to the other side, 9 divided by c. And the quotient of 4 and q, 4, that would be my dividend, and then q would be my divisor, so it goes second. So the dividends typically go first, the divisors go second. These are all pretty straightforward, not a lot of curveballs in that section. Now there's also equations, okay? And this is switching gears a little bit from expressions. Equations show that something is equal to something else. So now we're talking about equivalence. This side is equal to the other side. So we do have an equal sign. Just to give you some examples here, this would be an expression. This would be an equation because I have an equal sign. I can actually do some solving now. But over here, I'm missing some information. I can only write the expression. Okay, so there's no equal sign with expressions. There is one with equations, and we need to start solving things with equations. You cannot solve an expression, though, because we don't know the value yet. They didn't give us that information. They might eventually, but not yet. So they can also both have operations, variables, numbers. They can have a lot of things in common, but just remember, we're kind of looking for an equal sign or not an equal sign. You can remember this because equation starts with E, Q, U, A. An equal sign, guess what? Also starts with E, Q, U, A. All right, so if we go back to that last page there, these would be examples of equations. Write an expression or an equation based on the info below. Well, 4 times W is 18. So if I write that out, that's an equation. 4 times W is 18. Oops, I put X, sorry. But 4W equals 18. N divided by 7. Now, that's going to be an expression because there's nothing else that I know that it's equal to right now. So I'm just going to write an expression, though. 1/3 the sum of 11 and P. Now I'm looking for that word is or it equals to, and I don't see it, so I'm really just writing an expression. 1/3 the sum of 11 and P. So I want that information in parentheses, and I want 1/3 of it. So I could just multiply this by whatever that would be. In number 4, 14 is half of, is that Q or G? I don't know, but 14 is half of something. All right, so that's going to be an equation because it's going to equal 14. And I know that that's half of G. So if I do G cut in half, or G divided by 2, I get 14. So some of these will result in equations and some will result in expressions. At this point, I want you to try the bottom 4 on your own and see if you can think of their expressions or equations and what they would look like. So pause right now. All right, see how you did. This one's an equation because there's that word is. This is 45, so that's kind of your equal sign indicator. The product of R and 9. Again, coefficient needs to go out in front of the variable, so 9R equals 45. This one was just an expression, the difference between 5 and B. So 5 minus B. They didn't say the difference between 5 and B is an answer. They just said the difference of 5 and B. Here's another expression, quotient of S and 8, S divided by 8. And then this one, the quotient of M and 5 plus 9. So we want this. You can put parentheses around it, or maybe you don't need it because we would still do that first if they weren't there. But we want to add 9 to that answer. Okay, and they didn't give us like a equal sign kind of clue, so we don't need to write an equation for that one. Now, there's a lot in this section. This is a very important learning target because you have to be able to turn problems into expressions. Sometimes this might be simple problems like these. Sometimes it might be in context, like a word problem. They want you to represent it with an expression. So we want to be good with this one. So there might be a few things for you to work on. It might be knowing some of the key words. It might be just knowing how to come up with the expression. But your practice for this one is homework 5. You can see here that you are basically writing an expression for this section. They want you to write an expression to answer these questions down here, and then write each word phrase as another expression. So this is your practice sheet. Go ahead and get started on that.